Okay, welcome to this Unit 4B intro. I'm going to talk you through the main parts of Unit 4B paper. I'm going to show you what they did last year, the kind of stuff you should be doing for your work. At the end of this, there'll be some questions for you to go away and do. So, start off with, let's look at the spec. Okay, Unit 4B, this is worth 40% of your A2 and 20% of your overall A level, so it's worth doing really, really well. All right, you've got this booklet, and if you look at the spec, here's a bunch of things they get you to do. All right, if you just have a look at some of the stuff they're getting you to do, okay, and essentially what you've got to do is take the booklet, pick out the key themes or issues. All right, and then within that they break it down to a whole bunch of tasks. Okay, so it's data presentation, it's linking that task back to relevant parts of the spec of other units. It is looking at and essentially looking at what should be done with this issue. All right, so that's what the spec is, and you can have a look at that in more detail. It's on the AIB website. Now, very quickly, I'm just going to show you what we did last year. All right, last year's issue was super dull. It was on some flooding in this little village in Northumberland. All right, they were given a booklet with a bunch of information about these floods. Okay, loads of information about the floods. They were given a little map. They were given a bit of history about the flooding, and then the specific rainfall event, how much rain fell, what the impacts were, using a map, how they planned for it, how it was responded to, and kind of an evaluation of how good that response was from various different sites. There's also some data on rainfall. Okay. There's also on the back here a list of websites to go and check out. Alright, so that's what you get given. In the exam, you take this into the exam. Now, you mustn't write on this. That's so important, because if you get it written on, you're automatically kicked out. Okay? And then if we look at the kind of questions you're asked about, the questions then refer to the resource booklet, and you need to use the resource booklet plus your own knowledge and work. Okay, so in the resource booklet, there was a thing about presenting the data. They did a storm hydrograph, and you had to think about what factors might affect the shape of the storm hydrograph. Okay, and then they went straight on to looking at this. So human factors are more important than physical factors. So essentially, taking the theory of the booklet and applying it using your own geographical understanding. In this instance, the rivers unit. And then they had, this one's only a few questions. This one had, discuss how well prepared and organised the emergency response was to the Morpeth flood. Okay, so obviously you've been given some information about what they did, some good and bad things about it, and you've got to be able to give an opinion on that. All right. And the final question was an evaluation question about how effective it was. Okay, discuss whether it's worth spending millions of pounds or not. So you can see it gives you an issue, and you essentially have to give some commentary on the best thing to do in this situation. In the situation last year, it was the flood defences. Were they appropriate? Were they inappropriate? Should more have been done? Should it not have been done? Okay. But obviously that was last year. This is this year. So this is Riders for Health. Okay, which is a far sexier issue. It's far more interesting. Get your teeth into a bit more. All right. The crux of our issue is this: Kenya is a fairly poor country. All right. Kenya is working towards the 8 Millennium Development Goals. All right. It's making really good progress, but there are loads of issues. Riders for Health are a charity who work in Kenya. Okay, this is their website. Of course, you've had a look at this, and you can see what they do. We can look at where they work. Okay, so you can see how long they've been there for. Right, you see how they've been there for. It's only about sort of 15 years, and you can see they cover 5.1 million of the population, which is by no means all the population. All right. However, they're doing a brilliant job. Okay, but they can't get everywhere because the roads are really poor, and they're doing the job that the health service should be doing because the health service is really poor. All right. So the crux of the issue is: do you invest in improving the Kenyan health service, i.e. the government, or do you invest in improving the road networks so the Riders for Health can access all parts of the country? So that's kind of the crux of your argument. So you need to understand issues to do with aid, you need to understand what Riders for Health do, you need to understand the limits of being reliant on NGOs for aid, you need to understand how best the government could be doing its own job, and you need to understand kind of this in the context of the Millennium Goals and the issues they face, and within the context of Kenya's own geography. Okay, there's a cracking website here all about Kenya's own geography and some of the issues, and there's some really exciting images. There's loads of stuff here. So you can flick through all this and you can look up the topography. It's a very mountainous country because of its location on the Rift Valley. Some parts are really fertile, some parts are really arid. It's got Mount Kenya, very exciting. And it's got bags and bags of stuff, okay? But so you need to see this all within the context of Kenya's own local geography. So, have the resource booklet with you, okay? You cannot make notes on yours, but if you've printed a copy or you've scanned it, scribble all over it, all right? We've got a bit of context on Kenya, all right? 40 million people. We saw on the Rise for Health website they're only accessing like 5.1 million people. So Rise for Health clearly are doing a good job, but only in a small part of the country. Health situation, we're looking at probably a stage 2/3 country. So you've got a life expectancy of 6 years old, which is pretty low. A fairly high child mortality rate. All right. Now, some of the key things, I think, most people live in rural areas. Right. There hasn't been massive amounts of urban growth, or there's not huge amounts of wealth in urban areas, so it's not encouraging people to migrate. So mostly you've got rural areas where travel's difficult, right? So you've got a lot of rural areas with poor basic health services and poor infrastructure. Okay, so loads of people in rural areas are dying of really preventable diseases because there's no medics and people can't get there. All right, which is obviously an issue. Okay, this is Rise for Health. They're a super good charity. They were set up sort of late 80s, early 90s, and they do loads of good work. And essentially, they use motorbikes to access places that couldn't previously be accessed to bring healthcare, which is a super simple, super good solution. Right, and they've got programs all over the place. And you absolutely should be going on their website, and you should be getting a really good understanding of the kind of stuff Riders for Health are doing. You've got a series of maps here. All right, I don't think these maps are amazing. A sort of question about how best to present data using the maps. Some of the limitations of using maps. They're okay. They're a bit basic. All right, they're all from this website that was the UNEP Kenya Atlas. So have a flick through it. It's got this, and you can clearly see there's a relief whichever is lowest down is more arid, is drier, no one lives there. Okay, the higher up areas, if you look at that, this is relief, this is higher up. If you then link that to there's more precipitation in the higher up areas, and as a result of that, there's more cropland in the higher areas. And because there's more cropland, because there's more precipitation, because there's more rainfall, it's where everyone lives. Yeah, there's a clear correlation between where people live, the relief, the altitude, and then if we look at the density of poverty, you can see it's really poor wherever there are loads of people. All right, so if you were going to be Riders of Health, you'd be the government, you'd be looking at this going, right, these are the people we need to be targeting with our health scheme. Some issues with the data. Some keys are pretty shocking. Like this key here, okay, population density, it's really not that useful, okay, because it's got a massively wide scale. So I don't think it's that helpful. So you can look at the data and be critical of it. Say, well, this doesn't really give us an excellent indication. It's okay, but there are some problems with it. But I think overlaying the data on top of each other would be the most useful thing to do here, because you can see what the correlation is. Now, I would say the back few pages, so 12, 13, 14 and 15, these are where the issue is. Yeah. Kenya has its own health service, which is called KEMSA, which is your Kenya Medical Supplies Agency. Right. Their job is to supply medication and people, but to be honest, what they do it on a very ad hoc basis. Like if they'll just send whatever supplies they think is appropriate to a place, or whatever they've got to a place. That isn't necessarily based on what they know is needed. They just send what they've got. So obviously, places are not being sent the stuff they need, or they're being sent too much of the wrong stuff. This is partly due to the poor infrastructure. Yeah, it all comes back to this. Kenya's a a fairly poorly developed country. It hasn't really had much in the way of TNCs, FDI, hasn't really developed in that sense, so it hasn't really had that NIC sort of boost. So it's really got really poor communications, right? So the communication's not going on, so all these basic things aren't happening. All right, so what this is saying here is in order to improve the logistics, it needs a well-developed, well-designed, maintained IT system. All right, better supply chain, but it also needs a better delivery system, motorbikes, four-wheel drive vehicles. So, but here this is quite a telling statement, I think. There may be some important lessons to learn from the work that's already been done in Kenya for Rise for Health. So they're kind of saying the NGO's got the right idea. Maybe we should listen to them. They've also got massive issues with staffing. Okay, clearly LEDC, not a lot of money, not a lot of people. Massive brain drain as well. If you become a qualified healthcare professional in Kenya, chances are you can earn a lot more money moving overseas to practice. Okay, so they're losing an awful lot of people in Kenya to overseas posts. So they've got a lack of qualified staff. All right. And then we're looking at how we try and deal with this. So how do you approach this issue? One idea is to approach it via what we call a rotating expat program. So they'd be getting basically sort of relatively junior doctors in the UK to come over, spend 6 months or a year, train local Kenyans up, give them the skills, support needed, and that's one way of doing it. Of course, all these things rely on the sort of the goodwill, the money, etc., the aid from MEDCs. So we've got different ways. Essentially, what we're saying is there's different ways we can approach this issue. Okay. The final page has got Kenya, and that's linked to the Millennium Development Goals, which is on this website here, which of course, where are they? You've had a thorough look through. Yeah. And it's talking about, and ultimately, Millennium Development Goals are, look at them here, they're highly linked to health. And if you can tackle them, any country is going to develop, which is kind of the ultimate objective. So have a look through this. But some of the key issues, I think, are down here. All right, you've got some key facts in terms of there's quite a few health facilities, but they're mostly in urban areas. Right, but of course, here we go. Health expenditure in rural areas accounts for 30% of the government spending on health, while the spending in urban areas accounts for 70%, yet only 20% of Kenyans live in urban areas. So there's a massive discrepancy here. Okay, so the urban people are being looked after, they've got more money, the rural people are losing out. So I would say the key thing to really look at as well is what the options are from here. Right, they've given you a series of kind of ideas. Do you invest in human capacity, i.e. training people up? Do you invest in materials, drugs, equipment? Do you invest in the infrastructure? Because then you can access the people in rural areas, right? You've got a series of options, and they're saying you do a bit of each, and ultimately the issue is going to be how do you best improve Kenya's healthcare, all right? So that's the booklet in a nutshell. These websites absolutely should be getting looked through. You also should be on the Twitter page. So if I go, right now, if you log in yourself, well, let me just see. Okay, so if you go into this, if you follow the hashtag Unit4B, you'll see all this everywhere that's being, any school in the country that's got this is following this. All right, so if you follow that, follow this, and you're going to get an awful lot of information because everyone's doing it. All right, so attached will be some questions, but also you really should be following this because this is 20% of your A-level, and it's quite a straightforward exam if you just know the issue and you've read around the issue. All right, this is doing a lot of it for you. Yeah, there's massive amounts here, loads and loads of good articles. They're all going to be relevant. So have a flick through them and see what you can get, because that's going to massively help you. All right, have a go at this. When we finish the course, we'll move on to this unit proper, and there'll be about a dozen lessons that we'll put together for you. But in the meantime, you absolutely must be doing your own research, sharing your own ideas, and being proactive, because otherwise you are going to struggle. Best of luck, and I will see you next week.